Chapter 834 Beg me her. It all happened so quickly, but when she felt his gaze fall on her for just a split second, time seemed to come to an abrupt halt, and so did her world. His expression was the same as usual, a little aged. Perhaps a little different, but it wasn't so different from how it had always been. Yet for some reason in that moment, it felt as though that simple gaze told her 1,000 words. He nodded at her and said something. She couldn't quite make out what those words were. That was because she knew exactly what he was going to do, and in that moment her mind blanked. Her usually brilliant mind blanked, and she dully stood on the ground, staring up toward the sky, which was soon enveloped by a brilliant white light that came directly from her father's body. It enveloped the sky in its entirety. Boom. That was the last thing she saw before a terrifying explosion covered the sky, and she was hurled a great distance away from the scene. Bang! She collided with a tree, and if it weren't for the protective shield that materialized around her just as she was about to make contact with the tree, she likely would have sustained significant injuries. Ugh! With a groan, she forced herself to look up, and that was when she realized that the mist that had blanketed the sky previously had completely disappeared. Her mind, which seemed stained with something moments prior, seemed to clear up. But none of that concerned her at the moment. What she was concerned about was something else, and she hastily looked around in the sky for any signs of him. But no matter how hard she looked, she couldn't find him. In fact, she couldn't see anything, and her legs started to go numb. That was until a hand pressed against her shoulder and a familiar voice reached her ear. "He's gone." What? When she turned her head, she caught sight of a hazy, almost transparent figure. "Who are you?" She thought he sounded familiar, but the way he looked, was that really who she thought he was? "It's me." His voice was hoarse, almost feeble, but when he turned his head and their eyes met, Melissa understood that it was really him. "What are you doing here? How did you get here? Were you here originally?" "No." He shook his head and stared into the distance, toward a spot where she couldn't see. "Are you really fine?" Melissa didn't answer. It was a question she didn't know the answer to. Was she fine? She didn't feel very much. And that was a problem. She just felt empty. And she didn't know why. She just did, and found everything hard to process. I don't know." She was eventually able to mutter those words. Taking out her glasses, her vision started to blur, and she found herself unable to see what was ahead anymore. In all honesty, she could have had her eyesight fixed a long time ago. Be it a potion or surgery, she could have. She was rich and was smart enough to produce a potion that could fix her eyesight. He just didn't want to. There were times when her blurred vision would stop her from feeling people's gazes on her and give her peace of mind. There was no one around her at the moment apart from Ren, but even so, she didn't want to keep her glasses on. Didn't want to see what was above her anymore. "She's surprisingly calm." The thought crossed my mind when I stared at Melissa beside me. At least that was what I was able to perceive from her on the outside. Whether she was truly calm, I wasn't too sure, but I didn't have time to care. My entire body was writhing, and the pain that was permeating every part of me was making it difficult for me to maintain any semblance of sanity. It's good that he made things easier for me. When I looked up and stared at the area above me, I knew that things weren't over yet. Still, the situation was very advantageous for me at the moment. Especially since I was in no state to properly fight at the moment. There was something that I had to do before coming here, and that took almost everything from me. But it was worth it. Swoosh. With the sudden blurring of my vision, I appeared before a certain area in the sky and looked around me. That was until my attention was eventually drawn to a dark spot in the sky. It was writhing in the air, and the skeleton of a figure was gradually beginning to take shape as it did so. I didn't waste a second and arrived before it. "It looks like I've arrived on time." I pressed my hand against the blob, and the moment I made contact with it, I felt a soothing energy spread throughout my entire body from head to toe. My body, which was briefly disappearing and then reappearing, started to take shape again, and the excruciating pain that had been pulsating through every part of me started to subside. It was a scene that I had experienced a couple of times already, and my comprehension of the laws started to increase at the same time. The more I was able to comprehend, the more I found myself able to use Kevin's old powers. It was also thanks to that I was able to get into the pillar without destroying it from the outside. It still took a little toll on me, but it was a necessary struggle. "Who are you?" While I was enjoying the warm sensation, I heard a certain voice, and when I looked down, I saw that the blob had transformed into a demon. His expression was anything but friendly, and the power that radiated from his body was also nothing to scoff at. With that being said, should you really be talking to me when you're in that state? I placed the palm of my hand against the demon's shoulder, and immediately he froze in place. Golden runes whirled all around the area where the prince and I were standing and wrapped themselves tightly around his body. My breath left my body and I found myself struggling to keep my composure. In spite of this, I cast my gaze off into the horizon and nodded my head. A blue light headed our way and enveloped the entirety of my vision. A powerful force soon enveloped the area that the demon and I were in, and everything turned silent. I wasn't sure for how long things were like that, but when my sight returned, I found myself standing in the middle of the air with two black orbs levitating in front of me. It took a while for it to sink in, but pain unlike anything I'd ever felt before started to cover every inch of my body. Achoo. I struggled to keep my breath in check and had to take several large gulps of air in the process. It was for a short moment, but the pain that came upon the complete destruction of my body almost made me faint from the pain. Ever since the war had started, the only thing I felt was pain, and I was starting to wonder, just when exactly was I going to get used to this pain? I wanted to get used to this pain. Are you all right? It was Gervas's voice that broke me out of my thoughts, and when I turned to look at him, I shook my head. No. The pain I was experiencing wasn't something I could describe with words. I was anything but okay. So, I was still hanging there. Is it over? Gervas asked, looking at the two orbs in the sky. I shook my head again and extended my hand to where the orbs were floating. It's not over until the core over here is destroyed. I was able to feel the demonic energy that was pulsating from the core as soon as I got a hold of it and held it in my grasp. The other orb, on the other hand, softly moved toward my mouth, and I quietly ingested its content. Once more I was engulfed in a whole world of pain, but I bore with it. It was a lot lighter than the other pain I felt. Crash. Only once I finally managed to ingest all of the contents within the orb did I finally clench my hand and smash the core in my hand. Rumble. Rumble. The entire pillar began to shake almost instantly after that, and the world contained within it showed signs of collapse. I turned to look at Gervas for a brief moment before looking down at Melissa below. Do me a favor and bring her out with you, Law. I had to stop myself mid-sentence. All of a sudden, a projection appeared right before my very eyes, and all it took was one glance to understand what had happened. My heart sank. I'm sorry. Wait, Wah. Those were the only two words I was able to utter before waving my hand and disappearing from the spot. Chapter 835 Ryan's Mind. 1. Pillar of Greed. It was dark and damp. A musty smell of damp earth and rocks filled Ryan's nostrils as his eyes slowly opened up. Blinking a couple of times, he noticed that he couldn't quite see very far. The dim lighting around him made it difficult to see beyond a few meters. When he reached out with his hand, he felt a rough and uneven surface. A cave. That was the first thought that crossed his mind as he felt the sides of the walls. Drip. Drip. The sound of dripping water echoed in all directions in the space he was in, further reaffirming his original assumption. Right when he tried to move, he noticed that his feet were bound to something and that the little mana inside of his body had been completely sealed. Shit. Letting out a curse, he squinted his eyes and noticed a small bracelet on his ankles. They were firmly clamped at his ankles and were rather thick, about the size of his forearms, and made it impossible for him to move properly. This is bad. He knew instantly that the situation was not good. It was also at that moment that he recalled what had led to his sudden appearance over here, and his expression changed. Leopold. He called out, hoping to receive some sort of answer, but it was much to his dismay that he realized that he was the only person inside the cave. Crap. Ryan started to worry a little. Although Leopold was stronger than him, he didn't know what was currently happening and was understandably worried. That being said, Hugh. All it took was a single breath for Ryan to calm himself down. He had been on many dangerous missions in the past, and this wasn't any different. After calming himself down, Ryan closed his eyes and started to ponder over his options. While he wasn't like Ren and didn't have a chip inside of his brain, he was still a genius in his own right. Several different scenarios popped up in his mind, and it wasn't long before a plan formulated inside of his mind. I guess that could work. He opened his eyes. Unlike before, his gaze was calm and no longer was he nervous like a few moments prior. Tao then. Fiddling his tongue around his teeth, his tongue settled over the furthest tooth on his bottom right side, and his expression cringed a little. Crack. With a low snapping sound, his tooth came undone and fell directly onto the ground. The process was rather quick, but it still hurt a little. Turning his head to stare at the tooth in front of him, Ryan moved his body forward a little and he picked the tooth with his tongue. Who would have thought I'd have to use this? It's good that I came prepared. Although his mana was sealed, he had installed a mechanism within the tooth that enabled him to access the contents without the need to use mana. It took him about 20 seconds, and within that time, the tooth had completely changed into a tiny black box. Tapping onto it with his tongue, Ryan was able to catch a glimpse of a myriad of different items. I guess Ren's nagging wasn't useless. He had originally made this for Ren, but he had also made one for himself and the others. He never would have thought he'd need to use it, but as luck would have it, he indeed found himself in a situation where he needed to use it. Even though his main dimensional space was taken and he was stripped of all his possessions, he wasn't necessarily as hopeless as he would have been. Click. Easier than I thought. After disabling the bracelet that was on his ankle using one of the items in his dimensional space and making sure that it didn't trigger the alarm, Ryan finally let out a sigh of relief. That was nerve-wracking. As composed as he was, he had been nervous the entire time. One wrong move and everything would go up in the air. Since he valued his life, during the process he found himself sweating more than he had ever done during an intense workout. Thankfully, everything worked out and nothing happened. That was what mattered the most, and he pressed his hands against the ground, helping himself up. I wonder how they designed the bracelet. Taking the bracelet out, Rain started to study it. He understood that knowing the mechanism behind it was extremely important for his next course of action, and so he spared no second to study it. I wonder what this circuit does. Is this the one that connects to the mana disruptor, or is it? And so, even though time was tight, Ryan spent the next couple of hours just staring blankly at the bracelet in his hands. He imprinted every circuit within his mind, and he forced himself to understand everything that was going on inside of the artifact. Once he was done stretching his body, he took out a small artifact from his dimensional space. It was the same shotgun-like artifact that belonged to Leopold. He may or may not have stolen it from him. Not that it mattered since he had several spare ones. What a waste of a core. Retrieving a small core from his dimensional space, he placed it over the artifact and activated it. A gentle glow formed on the artifact in his hand. This will do. Given the disparity in strength between him and Leopold, it was a given that he had to use a core to supplement the use of the artifact. He would never be able to make use of the artifact if it weren't for the core. This way, with his mana restored, he could now see better within the darkness, and that was when he noticed a small opening that was sealed by an iron door. Approaching it carefully, Ryan peeked through the small gap above, and that was when he caught sight of two demons standing guard. They look rather strong. He couldn't exactly tell, but they were certainly stronger than him. Not as strong as Leopold, though. He could at least say this much. That's good. Had they been stronger than him, then the situation would have been a lot more difficult. Ryan shifted his focus to the iron door while sticking his tongue out and bent over to place a small device over the top of it. The device's 8 legs appeared to be clamping down on the metallic door in a manner that was eerily reminiscent of a spider. Click. Pressing the buttons and trying to make the least sound possible, the gadget activated, and the 8 legs clamped harder on the metallic door. Each of the legs emitted a minuscule red light from its base, and this light began to revolve around the device in a clockwise direction. A small red circle formed on the iron door shortly after, and once the legs rotated twice, Ryan put the gadget away. Looks like they haven't noticed. Since the machine was designed to be extremely quiet and unnoticeable, Ryan was able to create a small opening on the door without being noticed by the demons. So long as he gave it a light knock, it would fall and an opening would appear. Standing up, he looked toward the 2 guards from the opening above and he knocked at the door once. He didn't bother ducking down and just stared at them from the small opening above. Who? Even though it was a soft knock, it was enough to immediately draw the attention of the 2 demons who were standing guard. Both of their heads snapped around to look in his direction. What was that? Hey, look. They soon took notice of Ryan, whose eyes were fixed on the two demons. He can move. How is this possible? Did the band malfunction? The demons seemed rather shocked by the fact that Ryan was able to move and get to where they were. But that shock didn't last for long as the two approached the opening. How did you G? The demon never got to finish that sentence. Right as the two approached the door, Ryan knocked on the area where the gadget had previously been placed, and a piece of the door fell. In that split second he positioned the shotgun so that it covered the gap that had appeared and pulled the trigger on it with his left hand. Bang. Ack. Irk. The power that the shotgun held proved to be a little too much for the two demons, who were blasted into pieces as multiple holes appeared on their bodies. Oh wow. Even Ryan was astounded by the shot's power, but he didn't let it affect him and pushed the door open to let himself out. Shortly after that he moved toward the two demons and retrieved another gadget from his dimensional space. The gadget was merely a small pen that he used to scan the bodies of the two demons before retrieving their cores. I hope this works. Clicking on the top of the pen, Ryan felt a small vibration coming from the pen. It continued to vibrate for the next couple of seconds before stopping, and when it did, a small light burst forth from the top, enveloping Ryan completely and changing his whole structure. In a matter of seconds his skin turned dark and his body became taller. Two horns emerged from the top of his head, and shortly after that two wings materialized on his back. Taking out a mirror, Ryan looked at himself and nodded in satisfaction. Good. What he had done was merely create a hologram that overlapped with his figure, enabling him to look like a demon. Although it was not the most suitable approach that he could take given the circumstances, it was the most appropriate approach. Placing the pen in his pocket, Ryan put one of the demon cores away and crushed the other one. A wave of demonic energy burst forth shortly after crushing the core, and beckoning it with his hand, the demonic energy started to move and coat Ryan's body. Instantly his body started to emit the aura of one of the demons he took down. While it closely resembled the demon's aura, it wasn't the same. There were subtle differences. If one paid close attention, they'd notice that the demonic energy that was coating his body was thinning by the second, but that didn't really matter to Ryan. He wasn't planning on staying for much longer. Tao then. With everything in check he closed the door behind him and rubbed his hands. He didn't even bother hiding his traces, he just left. To find Leopold. Chapter 836 Ryan's Mind 2. The internal structure of the underground cavern was massive. Ryan couldn't count the handful of times he had taken the wrong path and headed toward a dead end. It was starting to get to him. Not this one either. Staring at probably what seemed to be like the 10th dead end, Ryan sighed in frustration and glanced at his phone. There was a single red dot displayed on the screen, and that was where Ryan was currently headed to. That was where Leopold was being held, and while he knew the exact direction of where he was, finding him was starting to prove to be a more difficult task than he had anticipated. In a maze, just knowing where someone was wasn't enough. If only he was somewhere more open. The fact that he was inside a massive underground network made it hard for Ryan to find the correct path, but he wasn't completely hopeless. When he reached a new one, his phone would trace his steps so that he could see exactly where he was going and the places he had been in the past. Although he did run into a lot of dead ends, this helped him stay on track and stopped him from going to the same places twice. He was steadily making progress, but still. Ugh. Ryan groaned out loud. This is so frustrating. Time was of the essence and he was wasting a lot of time finding the right path. When he looked at his body, the demonic energy that had been encircling him had practically disappeared, and he no longer felt like a demon. If he were to meet a demon, he'd instantly be found out. How annoying. The situation was anything but pleasant. Despite that, Ryan could only grit his teeth and take out another demon core. This one belonged to the second demon he killed. Crushing it in the palm of his hand, he repeated the process from before and once again trekked on. No point in complaining. If I don't hurry up, things might turn for the worst. I need to hurry up. Bingo. Ryan didn't know for how long he had walked, but after a couple more dead ends he finally found the correct route, and he was shortly exposed to a large opening that was filled with thousands of metallic doors. He was still quite a distance away from it, but he was able to see everything properly with the aid of a certain device. Well, shit. Ryan's face fell the moment he noticed the numerous doors. Unlike his cell, the area was far more secure, with thousands of different demons patrolling the area. They all emitted intimidating auras, and Ryan knew that even Leopold was no match for them. If he were to be caught by them, he could only shudder at the thought. It's fine. Hey, I can do this. Ryan had already thought things through before, and what he was seeing was within his calculations. Scanning around, his eyes paused on a certain door in the distance, and taking a deep breath, he remained where he was. He didn't feel that the time was ripe yet and remained where he was for the next couple of hours. Ryan wasn't idle for those couple of hours. During that time, he made a concerted effort to eavesdrop on the conversations that were taking place and to assimilate all of the information that he was learning from those around him. The endeavor proved extremely useful as he started to get a better idea of how the system over here worked, and what exactly was going on. While he wasn't aware of the reason they were gathering prisoners, he knew that none of them were going to be kept there for long, as he'd see demons routinely approaching the cell doors and taking out the prisoners. The rest of what he heard was rather useless, but that didn't concern him as he had heard enough. He was prepared to make a move. I still have some demonic energy covering me, so I should be fine. After confirming that the demonic energy that surrounded his body was still stable, he nodded his head with an unwavering determination. He was ready. But the moment his foot stepped into the area, he felt countless eyes fall on him and his entire back was drenched. Even so, with a stoic face, he continued to move toward where Leopold was being held. He ignored the gazes and continued forward. This seems to be work. Stop there for a second. A loud voice interrupted his thoughts and Ryan's body froze on the spot. When he turned his head, he almost fell to his knees. Towering over him was a large demon with a bulky build and a mustache. His presence was overwhelming, and Ryan had a hard time keeping himself from passing out under his enormous presence. He understood at that moment that he wasn't dealing with just any regular demon but someone that seemed to be high up in position. "Why, yes," he asked, his composure almost faltering. "What are you doing over here?" A direct question. One which Ryan already had an answer to. "I'm coming here from another sector, and I need to meet one of the sources that we've recently placed." Sources was one of the terminologies that Ryan picked up while listening in on the demons for the past hour. While he wasn't sure of what they meant, he knew that the term referred to those that were taken in by the demons. Which one? Under the scrutinizing gaze of the demon, Ryan could only lower his head and point toward Leopold's gaze. "Door 9862? Last I recall, that's where a human resides. Is that the right place?" Lifting his head, Ryan cautiously nodded his head, trying not to seem too eager. "Yes, that's exactly where I need to be." Okay then." Surprisingly, the demon was quick to agree and stepped to the side. "Since you have work to do, I won't disturb you any further. When you go there, you can just tell them the reason why you're visiting and they'll let you in. I hope your findings are successful." "Thank you." Ryan felt rather relieved that things went so smoothly. Things would have been troublesome if the demon had noticed that something was wrong. Thankfully he didn't. "Okay, this is good." Fixing his gaze over the door where Leopold resided, Ryan took a deep breath and proceeded forward. At the same time he moved, he touched his wrist and tapped on it once. "Keep an eye on him, don't make a move yet," the commander said expressionlessly. When he turned his head, his gaze fixed on a demon, moving toward door 9862. From the moment that he appeared, he knew that he didn't belong in this sector. Even if we ignore the fact that demons of its rank wouldn't show up in such a location, the fact that the demonic energy that covered its body was rather faint was a great indicator that whoever this demon was, they were merely pretending to be something else. The only reason the commander hadn't stopped the demon right then and there was because he wanted to see what he wanted to do. Their goal. Since he could tell at a glance what the intruder's strength was, the commander wasn't particularly worried about the demon escaping from him. Just in case, he signaled to the other demons to keep a close watch on him. If the pretender tried to do anything, he'd have them killed in an instant. Tao then. Crossing his arms together, he quietly observed the pretender while glancing at the demons in the vicinity and signaling them to get ready. "I wonder what they're up to." The game of the mouse had begun. "Understood. You may enter." Click. Entering Leopold's room was surprisingly easy for Ryan. He didn't even have to say much to convince them to open the door for him and let him in. Are they just stupid or overconfident with themselves? Or was it that his disguise was just that good? That seemed like the most plausible answer. "Leopold." Entering the cell, the first thing Ryan did was call out for Leopold. Much to his relief, upon entering the cell, he spotted him instantly and rushed toward him. He was faring much better than he originally thought. "Are you all right? You're already here?" Fiddling with a familiar bracelet, Leopold nodded at him. His hair was unkempt, but other than that he seemed to be doing fine. In fact, he looked even better than when the two of them first appeared in this strange world. "I was just about to go out to look for you, but it looks like you beat me to it." "Liar." Ryan immediately called him out for his lies. While he indeed had the capability to do so, given that he had given him a similar tooth-like dimensional space, Leopold was by no means the type of person who would proactively look for someone. Chances were that he was most likely waiting for him to show up. And that annoyed him. "Hurry up, we don't have much time left." Tearing his gaze away from him, Ryan turned his attention toward the door. His brows furrowed, and he let out a long breath before looking back at Leopold. "You have the thing, right?" Staring back at him, Leopold took out a pack of gum and tossed one in his mouth. "If you mean that, then, yeah. H. Chapter 837 Ryan's Mind. 3. "They're coming out. What shall we do, Commander?" A voice transmitted into the commander's mind. The commander didn't answer immediately and pondered over the matter. It's safe to assume that the Pretender's goal is to save whoever is inside cell 9862. From the information, it seems to be a moderately strong human. The original goal of keeping the Pretender alive was to see what their motive was. The commander already had an idea beforehand and thus wasn't very surprised with what he found out. He was a bit disappointed, however. A pitiful attempt. It was honestly a pathetic attempt. The commander had expected much more, but it seemed like he was just being too cautious. He never thought someone would show up in such an obvious manner. He thought that there was something more to their terrible disguise, but it seemed that was it. "The moment they come out, apprehend them immediately. I no longer have any interest in the matter." Finally answering the communication, the commander turned around and left to patrol a different area. He was no longer interested in whatever was happening over here. Whatever interest he previously held had long been extinguished. Ah. His feet came to a sudden pause, recalling something. "Don't kill them. Keep them alive." The commander had a change of heart about the standard protocol that dictated that those who tried to infiltrate would get killed on the spot. Killing them was far too light of a punishment. "We need to set an example for those who misbehave. Surrender yourselves and we'll consider keeping your lives." The moment Leopold and Ryan left the room, demons surrounded them on all sides. They didn't even get the chance to do anything before a terrifying pressure locked onto them and stopped them in their tracks. The most confused one was Leopold, who turned his head to look at Ryan. His face was rather pale. "I thought you didn't get followed." Impossible, my disguise. It was perfect." Ryan's face appeared completely pale at this moment, giving off the impression that he was more than just flustered. Looking around at the demons around him, the holographic outline around his body flickered in and out before revealing his true body, and his face paled even further. "Oh no. So that's what it was." Ryan's sudden appearance made the demon realize something, and they all smiled. "You were looking to save your comrade, weren't you?" One of the demons said, his voice filled with light amusement. "You should have worked harder on your disguise." The commander saw through it at first glance. "I bet you went in all smug thinking about how stupid we were when, in reality, you were merely walking in on a trap that we've set up for you." The demon's words were rather harsh and Ryan's expression trembled. Most likely from embarrassment, Leopold thought. What are you going to do with us now?" Ryan asked in a quivering voice. He tried to step back, but his movements were impaired by the force that was enveloping their bodies. The only thing he could do was stay rooted on the spot and wait for the demons to do something. He was helpless, utterly helpless. "Don't worry," one of the demons reassured. "You're in luck. Under the commander's orders, you are not to be killed. The two of you." The demon alternated his gaze between Leopold and Ryan. "Will not be killed for now. In fact, you'll be moved to another cell where we can ensure that you don't pull another similar stunt like the one you just pulled. As a matter of fact, how exactly did you manage to escape from your cell?" The demon turned his gaze to look at Ryan, whose expression grew even paler. His entire body trembled and he seemed to be on the verge of crying. Such scene was found to be utterly amusing by the demons. I. He stuttered over his words, and the demons found the scene extremely amusing. Are you that scared? A demon approached him and patted him on the shoulder. Bringing his head closer, he whispered close to his ear. Don't worry, we won't kill you fast. We'll make sure to make it as slow as possible so the two of you can live for a longer period of time. Ah. Ah. Ryan's body started to tremble even further, and tears finally streamed down the side of his face. He's crying. The scene left the demons utterly amused as they couldn't help but laugh out loud amongst each other. Where did all the guts from before go? Why are you crying right now? Teasing him, the demons placed a new bracelet over Ryan's and Leopold's wrists, and the mana inside of their bodies instantly vanished. Then the demons placed the two of them on their shoulders and carried them like a sack of potatoes. While we carry them to the other quarters, check the room carefully. Make sure they haven't tampered with the room. Understood. In minutes, they were already far away from the cell that Leopold was previously held in. It was just the right distance. It's been a while since I've had such a hearty belly laugh. Kid, considering that you've brightened my day, I think we'll take it easy on you from here on out. Nice, aren't I? The demon once again tried to tease Ryan, but contrary to what he had expected, he was met with a calm smile. Is that so? A response like that caused the demon to immediately frown, but before he even had the chance to figure out why the human was suddenly smiling, the demon noticed that the human's lips were beginning to part. This should be far enough. Boom. Boom. Within a fraction of a second of Ryan uttering those words, there were not one but two horrifyingly large explosions heard reverberating through the cave system. The force that was released during those explosions was so intense that the entirety of the cave system shook, and a massive fire erupted from the ground, engulfing each and every passageway within the cave. Spurt. Spurt. Ryan and Leopold both reacted at the same time to the explosions. They suddenly produced a couple of daggers from nowhere and stabbed the demon that was carrying them in the neck. Arg. With an agonized scream, the demon that held Ryan fell to the ground and covered its neck with both hands. Black blood leaked down from the gap between his fingers, and he let out a terrifying wail. While this happened, Ryan and Leopold dashed toward the remaining demons and pointed their guns at them. They both shot at the same time. Bang. Bang. Arc. In contrast to Leopold, Ryan needed to use a sizable core before each use of the gun. Upon destroying the core, the weapon would go off and a demon would fall. He was a lot slower than Leopold at killing the demons around them, but he was still doing a good job, and by the time 5 seconds had passed, almost all of the demons had their cores shattered. That was tough. With both hands on his knees, Ryan tried to catch his breath. This had proven to be a lot more difficult than he had anticipated, but my plan has worked. From the very beginning, Ryan knew that there was no way that they wouldn't find out about his disguise. There were simply too many flaws in the disguise, and he knew better than to expect anything from it. Having said that, the fact that the disguise was terrible did not mean that it was completely useless. After evaluating all of his options, Ryan decided to use the situation to his advantage. Since his goal from the very beginning was to get to Leopold, he didn't care if he was found out in the process. Chapter 838 Ryan's Mind 4. Boom. Boom. It was the sound of two massive explosions that reverberated from two opposite ends that startled the commander out of his mood as his head immediately snapped upwards. What happened? He had just left the premises to go inspect the other areas when all of a sudden, two massive explosions happened. The commander was able to deduce from the degree to which the environment was shaken that the explosions were not something to be taken lightly, and his expression changed to one of grave concern. Commander! Commander! There's an emergency. A panicked voice reached his ears. Trying his best to remain calm, the commander spoke. Report to me what's going on. 2 explosions happened. One in the lower quarter where the lower-end prisoners are trapped and one in the higher quarter. Star Unit 5. Star Unit 5? Make the demons check the room. Overhearing the exact location of where the explosions had occurred, the commander's frown deepened and all of a sudden his face stiffened. It can't be. Pinching his chin, his foot unknowingly began to tap against the ground, and he quickly tried to contact the soldiers that were in charge of carrying the 2 prisoners. Star Unit 5, Delta Squad, please communicate with me. Star Unit 5, Delta Squad, please communicate with me. One quick word is enough. I need confirmation of your vitality status. Star Unit 5, Delta Squad, please communicate with me. It was much to his disappointment that none of them answered, and the commander knew that something was wrong. Communicating with all available squads within Star Unit 5. Communicating with all available squads within Star Unit 5. Communicating with all available squads within Star Unit 5. Star Unit 5, Alpha Squad reporting. Star Unit 5, Beta Squad reporting. Star Unit 5, Gamma Squad reporting. Star Unit 5, Delta Squad reporting. Repeating the same command 3 times, he received several replies back and he quickly issued an order. The targets are the 2 human prisoners from before. Go chase after them. I will be assisting. Why? There's no need for that. All of a sudden, a gentle voice rang in his ears and the commander's body stiffened. When he turned his head, the commander was shocked to see someone he was all too familiar with, and he immediately felt terrified. Why? Your Highness. Thump. Without wasting a single second, he flopped to the ground and lowered his head. He didn't dare look up, afraid of the impending consequences. Stand up. Prince Solbacon gestured with his hand, and the commander felt a force envelope his body, lifting his body up from the ground. Throughout the entire time, the commander couldn't move a single muscle in his body. Tell me. Prince Solbacon looked him straight in the eyes. What exactly is going on at the moment? Hey, where are we going? That's the wrong way. No, it's not. Ryan shouted, running forward with everything that he had. The explosions have just gone off and there shouldn't be many that survived them. Even if they did, they're probably injured or stunned by what happened. This is a good opportunity. Ryan's plan didn't just consist of setting up 2 explosions. If that were really the case, then it was a terrible plan. Sure, he'd be able to take some of the focus away from him for a short moment, but once everything settled down, a hunt would ensue, and he was sure he'd be caught in an instant. He knew this from the get-go and thus knew that such a simple plan wasn't feasible. If he wanted to escape with Leopold, he had to think of another plan. Thankfully, he was prepared. Over there. Returning to the spot where Leopold was previously held, Ryan's attention focused on the many doors around him. Just like he predicted, there were barely any demons around, and with Leopold behind him, Ryan wasn't worried about his safety just yet. Click. Arriving before one of the doors, Ryan placed the spider-like gadget over the door and activated it. Whoom. A tiny red circle materialized on the door, and with a light tap, a gap appeared on the door where he could insert his hand and open the door. Entering the cell, Ryan immediately spotted a figure on the floor and he rushed toward them. Without wasting a single second, he located the bracelet that was on their wrist and tore it apart. Shortly after that, he took out a potion and placed it on the ground. Wait, don't tell me. Right when he turned around, he found a baffled Leopold standing behind him. Ryan grinned at him. It's exactly what you're thinking. He reassured him. Tearing his eyes away from Leopold, Ryan rushed toward the door and moved to the next door beside them. Continuing in this manner, he repeated the same process, which resulted in the gradual and steady release of an increasing number of prisoners who had been confined within the cave system. All she could see was darkness, and it enveloped every part of her vision. Moving her body, she found that it was extremely heavy. Blinking her eyes a couple of times, she tried to move but found herself unable to. Whatever was binding her body, it made it impossible for her to move. Thump. She didn't struggle for long and soon leaned back against the hard ground. Her mind was an utter mess. She began to experience flashbacks of images and memories, and the more she recalled, the more disorganized her thoughts became. For some reason, the memories that flooded her mind didn't seem to merge within her. She could see that the memories and images seemed to belong to her, but at the same time, didn't. It was hard to explain, but to her, it was more like she was seeing someone else's memories. Someone that seemed to be her. Reliving moments and events that she couldn't remember properly. It felt rather uncomfortable, but with time, some memories started to merge with her. Kevin. She was eventually able to mutter a single name, but once she did, she found an inexplicable pain piercing right at her chest and her eyes became moist. Who is he? Why does he keep appearing in my memories? And why do I miss him so much? Emma was on the verge of losing it. The more she thought about him, the more her chest would tighten. She wanted it to stop but couldn't. One after another, memories started to resurface in his mind, and her chest clenched even more tightly. She didn't like the feeling at all. Ugh. Letting out a groan, she moved her body to the side, but just as she did, she suddenly felt a sudden tremor on the ground. Rumble. It was faint and almost imperceptible, and the only reason she even felt it was because she was quite highly ranked herself. Had it been someone else, they would have probably not noticed it. Her mind, which was previously a mess, started to clear up a little as she finally managed to find something to distract her. Extending her hand, she placed it against the ground and tried to feel for another tremor. She didn't have to wait for very long. Rumble. Something's happening outside. Once again feeling a slight tremor on the ground, Emma realized that something was happening somewhere outside of where she was confined. Are the demons fighting against the Alliance? That was the only explanation she could think of. Although her mind was messed up due to the memories that continued to flood her mind, she was still able to think properly, and she soon also recalled how she had ended up here. It was a fake. She also recalled what had happened moments prior to appearing over here, and her expression once again became complicated. Kevin. For some reason, this name seemed to trigger something within her. Even before she was abducted, someone who called themselves Kevin and resembled the person in her memories appeared in front of her and messed up her emotions. Whatever the unbearable feeling she was experiencing, Emma understood one thing. That was, so long as she understood who Kevin was, everything would stop. Why did he appear in those memories, and why did his face evoke such emotions in her? So long as she understood that, her mind would once again become clear and she would return to normal. At first she wanted to avoid finding out the answers to the questions. Run away from it. But with time she understood that she couldn't run away from it. Regardless of what she did, it would keep haunting her from behind and keep chasing her, clawing at whatever sanity she had left. For her own sake she needed to find the answer. Boom. The muffled sound of an explosion in the distance awoke Emma from her thoughts, and when she turned her head she noticed that the explosions were becoming more and more frequent, quietly moving in her direction. Bang! She didn't have to wait long for the explosions to reach her side. Shortly thereafter, a loud explosion rang out in the area she was in, and light immediately began to penetrate into the area she was in. The sudden burst of light made her squint in pain, but despite the pain she was able to catch a glimpse of a particular figure, and her eyes opened slightly. You. She called out with her voice, and the figure stopped before her. Though she couldn't see well, she could tell that their eyes had met, and that was when Emma got a better look at the figure. Surprisingly, she seemed to have seen them before, and her mouth parted open. Aren't you? Chapter 839 Chaos. 1. Everything was going smoothly. Going in and out of the cells, Ryan managed to help as many prisoners as possible. Furthermore, with Leopold backing him up from behind, he was able to move rather freely. Not only that, but the prisoners that he had rescued proved to also be a big help, as they instantly spread chaos within the cave system. Did you really have to take all my potions as well? Rushing toward another cell, Ryan overheard Leopold's grumble. If he could, he would have rolled his eyes at him. You think I have a choice? I've already used all of mine. Boom. Boom. The muffled sound of explosions rang everywhere, and just as Ryan opened up another cell to free another prisoner, he was surprised to see a familiar figure. You're Emma. He recognized her in an instant. It wasn't very hard. There weren't many people out there that were as pretty as her, and furthermore, with her being one of the few people that were close to Rin, he naturally did some research on her. Currently, she was lying down on the ground with a pale expression. Her lips seemed to be quivering and her gaze seemed to be fixed on him. She didn't look to be in the best of conditions, but at least her mind seemed clear. Judging from her expression, she seemed to have recognized him too. Bang! Ryan, hurry up. It was Leopold's voice that broke him out of his thoughts, and Ryan snapped out of it and got to work. Ah, right, sorry. Bending over, he looked at the bracelet that was on her ankle and made quick work of it. Click. Removing it wasn't hard. He already had a general understanding of how the mechanism worked thanks to the hours he had put in before escaping, and he was thus able to remove it rather quickly. Here, drink this. He handed Emma one of his potions and she quietly took it. Moments after ingesting the potions, Emma's complexion cleared up, and she was soon able to stand up without a problem. Thank you. Don't worry about it. Ryan waved his hand at her and looked back at Leopold. Bang. Bang. He was currently shooting one demon after another as sweat trickled down the side of his face. He was just barely holding on at the moment. Do you have any spare weapons? Right at that moment he heard Emma's words, and when he turned his head to look at her, his eyes lit up. That's right, she's with us right now. Unlike the two of them, Emma was a bona fide S+ ranker. If there was anyone who could fight the demons outside, it'd be her. Without wasting a single second, Ryan looked through his dimensional space and retrieved a sword from it. It wasn't exactly her weapon of choice, as he knew she used short swords, but that was all he had prepared. Here I have a sword. A sword. Frowning, Emma took the sword and casually swung it in the air. Swoosh. Swoosh. Her movements were quick, and with each swing the air would tear apart and a faint whistling sound would emerge. Next time I should just pack all the weapons I can find. Hopefully he'd never have to use the secret dimensional space again, but no one really knew what lay ahead in the future, so it was best to be prepared. This'll do, I guess. Satisfied with the sword, Emma shifted her attention toward the demons that were attacking Leopold, and her figure soon disappeared from the spot. Shortly after, she appeared before the demons and slashed her sword once. Thump. Heads came rolling down and everything ended in a matter of seconds. Not bad. Ryan was able to overhear Emma's mutterings as she slashed her sword to the ground, causing the blood that had been coating it to splatter all over the ground. Leopold, standing next to her, looked at her with his mouth wide open. Alternating his gaze between his firearm and her sword, he lowered his firearm and tossed a few gums in his mouth. I'm too old for this shit. Once again Ryan was able to overhear their mutterings and he shook his head. So, what do we do now? I'm not too sure. Ryan answered Emma. Quite frankly, his goal was to create as much chaos as possible so that the two of them could escape. However, now that Emma was with them, he was no longer as worried as before. He was strong, extremely strong. So much so that he no longer feared for their safety as much as before, and could take things a lot more calmly. Well, perhaps it's best if we don't take things lightly. It was best to be as cautious as possible, as the incident he had caused may have attracted the attention of demons of a higher rank. No, the incident without a doubt had attracted the attention of the higher-ranked demons. It was crucial that they be careful. I really can't think of anything we can do at the moment. Pondering over his options, Ryan's gaze eventually settled on a couple of demons not so far from where they were, and an idea popped into his mind. That might work. He turned to look at Emma. Can you paralyze them and bring them to this room? If we want to have a better idea of what we need to do next, then we need information. You're right. Nodding her head in agreement, Emma's gaze turned toward the demons that Ryan pointed at and disappeared from the spot. She returned shortly after and threw them both on the ground. Thump, thump. Ryan was rendered speechless upon seeing the demons thrown to the ground like rag dolls, but he kept his thoughts to himself and bent down to face the demons. If you want to live, give us a map of the cave system. His question was met with no response. But Ryan didn't care and continued to ask questions. Where exactly are we? Where is the exit? What are you demons planning? Why are you capturing so many people? Ryan kept peppering the demons with questions one at a time, but they never responded to any of them. They were adamant about maintaining their silence the entire time. Ryan. What is it? Hearing his name called, Ryan raised his head. When he did, he saw Emma looking at the door of the room and he understood what she was trying to hint at. All right. Supporting himself with his hands over his knees, Ryan slowly sat up and let out a long sigh. Things could have been so much easier if the two of you had answered our questions, but I guess I should have seen this coming. Extending his hand, 3 bracelets appeared in his hand, and he handed them to Emma and Leopold before putting them on himself. Wear this for now and seal your mana. I've got a better idea. Click, click. Leopold and Emma fully trusted Ryan and did as he told them. Nodding at them, he took their weapons back and put them in his dimensional space before turning his attention back toward the demons in front of him. Tau then. He smiled, taking a couple of syringes from his dimensional space. Who would have thought I'd ever get to use these? While he did develop them out of interest, he never really thought he'd use them in his life. Funny how life can be sometimes. He had once offered the serum to Ren, but he rejected it and told him to use it for himself. Who would have thought they'd come in handy so soon? What are you doing? You'll see. Walking toward the demons, Ryan bent down and placed the syringe by their necks. Because Emma had done a considerable job taking care of them, Ryan was able to inject them with the serum without any problem. Wake up. The moment Ryan injected the serum into their bodies, the demons started to convulse rapidly as their eyes turned completely white and saliva started to leak out of their bodies. Thankfully, they weren't like this for very long and soon calmed down. There was, however, a noticeable difference between them. If their eyes were clear before, they were now rather dull and they didn't seem to be very responsive. Looks like it worked. Putting the empty syringes back, Ryan walked toward the two demons and placed his hand over their shoulders. Stand up, he ordered, and the two demons stood up. There wasn't even a hint of hesitation in their movements, and Ryan smiled at the sight. Good. He patted them on the shoulder. Good, it looks like they are following commands rather well. I was worried they wouldn't listen to me since I didn't have much time to experiment with the substance, but it looks like I worried too much. Bang! A loud explosion rang in the distance and Ryan snapped out of his thoughts. Staring at the two demons, his eyes sharpened and he commanded. For now, lead us out of the cell. The three of us are prisoners that you've managed to recapture. Ryan moved behind the two demons and followed their every move as they advanced without uttering a single word. What? When he turned his head to look at Emma and Leopold, he was surprised by the looks the two of them were giving him. Was rather uncomfortable. Especially when Emma looked at Leopold and said, "You see the resemblance, don't you? Remind me not to ever let children near that guy." Yes, I will. Their conversation was just as confusing. Chapter 840 Chaos. Lead us toward the exit. Ryan issued the command to the demons, his voice calm and collected despite the chaos that surrounded them. It was an unusual situation to say the least. The demons, previously doing everything in their power to resist him, were moving in unison as they followed his orders to the word. They were no different than puppets at the moment. Bang! The muffled sound of explosions rang in the distance as screams echoed everywhere. In the midst of the madness that had overtaken the underground system, it seemed that no one was paying them any attention. This was good. Everything is moving smoothly. Their current situation was rather delicate, and just one single mistake would cost them their lives. Having exhausted all of his means, Ryan could only hope that everything flowed smoothly. Yeah, it's going to work. I should have already accounted for everything. As they moved forward, Ryan found himself growing increasingly confident in his plan. He had expected the demons to be suspicious of their group, but it seemed that his strategy was working even better than he had hoped. Emma's presence was proving to be an unexpected boon. The demons seemed to be more focused on the chaos around them than on the group of humans that were following them. It wasn't long before they found themselves moving through a labyrinth of tunnels. Ryan couldn't help but feel a sense of awe at the sheer scale of the underground system. He had always known that it was vast, but seeing it firsthand was a different experience altogether. Swoosh. Over here. Move. As they moved through the tunnels, they saw demons rushing past them, heading toward the areas that they had previously been in. But the demons paid them little attention. Their gaze was focused solely on the task at hand. It seems like the prisoners are making things difficult for them. Good. The group continued on for what felt like hours. Ryan had lost track of time and he wasn't sure how much longer they could keep up the pace. But then in the distance he saw a faint glimmer of light. His heart skipped a beat as he realized that they were nearing their destination. As they approached the opening, the demons in front of them came to a sudden stop. Ryan hesitated for a moment, unsure of what to do. But then he understood. The area ahead was where he needed to go. He turned to the demons and spoke softly, his voice barely above a whisper. "The exit is over there, isn't it?" The demons didn't reply, but their nodding heads confirmed what he had suspected. Ryan felt a surge of excitement as he realized that they had made it. When he turned his head, he saw that both Emma and Leopold were looking at him. "Let's be careful when going there. We might never know if there are any demons guarding, plus." Frowning, Ryan moved to where Emma and Leopold were and removed their bracelets. What lies ahead might not necessarily be the exit, so it's best if we're careful. Click, click. After removing the bands, Leopold and Emma felt their mana return, and Ryan returned their weapons to them. At the same time, he handed them a couple of tools to conceal their presence so that they wouldn't be found out later on. The process was rather fast, and they soon turned to face the glimmering light in the distance. There was an apparent nervousness in their gazes at the moment. Even though they were strong, they knew that they were far from being the strongest in their surroundings. They still had to tread carefully. "Let's go." Extending his hand and crushing the cores of the two demons that had brought them here, the demons disappeared into dust, and Ryan followed Emma from behind. Each step was light, and the closer they got to the opening, the more nervous Ryan became. "It's going to be fine. I've been through worse." He could practically feel his own heart beat out of his chest at the moment, and soon they all passed through the light. The moment they passed through the opening, everyone was shocked by what they were seeing. They had emerged into a large, cavernous space with a high ceiling that seemed to stretch up into the darkness. The walls were rough and jagged, and the floor was littered with debris. But the most disturbing thing was the rune that had been intricately set up in the center of the room. It was massive, stretching for several meters in every direction, and it glowed with an eerie, pulsating light. Sitting around the rune were several members of the Alliance, and the three of them could vividly see the mana in their bodies get sucked dry out of them, turning them into skinny husks that would soon fall down and be replaced by new members every minute. The entire thing was gruesome, and Ryan's face turned green. Shit. He felt a chill run down his spine, as if he had stumbled upon something that he was not meant to see. He took a step back, his mind racing with questions and fear. Emma and Leopold were similarly shocked, their eyes wide with shock as they looked upon the scene. They had to cover their mouths in order not to make any sound, but it was too late. As soon as they arrived, Ryan and Emma realized that they had underestimated the demons that lay beneath them. Despite their careful planning, they were instantly detected by the numerous demons that lurked in the shadows. Countless pairs of glowing eyes stared up at them, making their skin crawl with fear. "Shit." Ryan cursed under his breath as his body tensed up with a sudden chill. They had tried their best to remain cautious, but it seemed like their efforts had been in vain. All the tools they had used to conceal themselves had failed, and now they were caught in the demons' sights. "So be it," Emma said grimly, drawing her sword and jumping down into the fray. "Emma?" Startled, Ryan called out for her, but it was already too late. Swoosh. Blade drawn, her blade flashed in the dim light, and Ryan watched as she jumped down and began hacking at the runes beneath them, with each blow releasing a burst of mana. Boom. Arc. Catch her. Caught off guard, a few of the demons fell to her blade, but it wasn't long before she was surrounded on all sides. Spurt. "Since we're screwed anyway, we might as well do as much damage as possible," Emma shouted from beneath as she continued to slash at the runes. Ryan knew that he needed to help her, but he also knew that he wasn't strong enough. He watched in horror as several powerful demons approached her, realizing that she was no match for them. "Shit, I need to do something." Ryan's heart pounded in his chest as he watched Emma struggle against the demons. She fought valiantly, but it was all for naught. She was easily overpowered and eventually crashed against the wall beneath them. Bang. Ugh. Ryan started to bite his nails out of nervousness and rummaged through his dimensional space for anything that could. That's enough. But before he could do anything, he felt a hand press against his shoulder, and his entire body froze on the spot. The same was true for the demons below, who stopped in their tracks. "You guys have caused quite a problem for me." A soft voice boomed out, and Ryan felt something claw into his body. When he turned his head, his eyes caught sight of a particularly sinister-looking demon. Ha. His presence was unlike any of the other demons Ryan had seen before, and he struggled to breathe. He exuded a sense of power and malevolence that made Ryan's skin crawl. The demon seemed to be smiling, but when his gaze fell upon the runes beneath them, his expression turned sinister. "I see. You guys must be the reason for all of the chaos that has ensued, right?" The demon spoke, his voice sounding like soft, tempting whispers that almost made Ryan agree with him. Biting his lips until they bled, Ryan forced himself out of the trance. He could feel the demon's grip tightening on his shoulder, and he knew that he had to act fast. Spurt. But before he could even do anything, his vision clouded with red, and when he turned to see the source, he found Leopold staring at him with wide eyes. Their gazes lingered for a moment, and Leopold lowered his head to look at the gaping wound on his chest. Blood leaked everywhere and his gun fell to the ground. Th. Raising his head back up to stare at Ryan, he cocked his head. Why? He never got to finish that sentence. Staring at Ryan one more time, Leopold fell over the edge and against the hard surface beneath. Thump. Ow, Leopold. Watching Leopold fall to the ground, Ryan shouted at the top of his lungs, but it was already too late. Human child. A soft whisper reached Ryan's mind. You need to understand that there are consequences one has to pay for their actions. Ah. Wah. Ryan was barely able to think at that moment. He was still reeling from the shock of watching Leopold's death. The image of Leopold's body falling down the edge kept replaying in his mind, and he felt a sense of overwhelming blankness. Indeed. It was then that he heard a soft, chilling voice that broke through the fog in his mind. A hand appeared from the space itself and grabbed onto the head of the demon beside Ryan, crushing him against the wall. Boom dash. The impact was deafening, and a black foot slowly stepped out of the void to reveal a familiar figure. Ryan's eyes widened in shock as he realized who it was, but his words stopped the moment he heard his voice and his entire body trembled. A bone-chilling coldness pervaded every part of his body, as he felt a primal fear he never felt before in his life. Unknowingly he took a step back. Away from the figure he knew. One should indeed pay for their actions.